Every story leaves something behind. A whisper, a shadow, a question that was never answered. Here, we dig through the forgotten files, the unsolved mysteries, the chilling true crimes, and the horrors people wish had stayed buried. From haunted legends to real-life nightmares, every tale is pulled straight from the horror archives. So turn down the lights, put on your headphones, and step carefully, because once a story enters the horror archives, it never truly leaves. This first story was sent in by a listener who went metal detecting behind an old church in Virginia and found a trail of jewelry leading somewhere he really didn't want to go. This one is called The Field Behind the Church. The first signal I got was a ring, a small gold band, sitting about 4 inches down in the soil, and it was still warm. That's the detail that made me stop. Not warm like the ground had heated it, warm like someone had just taken it off their finger. I'd been detecting in this field behind an old Methodist church in rural Virginia for about 2 hours. It was late October, and the light was that pale gray you get right before the sun drops behind the tree line. The field hadn't been plowed in years. Knee-high dead grass, a few twisted fence posts, and the church itself sitting dark and silent about 100 yards behind me. There was no parking lot, no road noise, nothing. Just the wind pushing through the grass and the steady pulse of my detector. I pocketed the ring and kept sweeping. Over the next 30 minutes, I found 2 more rings, then a bracelet, then a necklace with a small cross pendant, all gold, all sitting shallow like they'd been placed there recently, not buried for decades, and all of them were warm. I started paying attention to where I was finding them. They weren't scattered randomly. They were in a line, a very deliberate line, about 3 feet apart, heading from the center of the field toward the tree line at the far edge of the property. Like breadcrumbs, I followed the line. Each signal was another piece of jewelry. A watch, a locket with a photo inside too corroded to make out. Another ring, this one larger, a man's ring. The line kept going, and I kept digging. And the whole time the sky was getting darker and the wind was picking up, and I had this growing feeling in my chest like I was doing something I shouldn't be doing. The line led me to the trees, right at the edge of the field where the grass gave way to dense woods. I got the strongest signal I'd gotten all day. I knelt down and started digging. About 8 inches down, my trowel hit something solid. I brushed away the dirt and found a metal box, like an old cashier's box, rusted but intact. I pried it open. It was full of teeth, human teeth, dozens of them, maybe more, all mixed together, some with fillings, some without, molars, canines, incisors. I dropped the box and stood up so fast I nearly fell over. That's when I noticed the smell. It had been there the whole time, I think, but I'd been so focused on the signals that I hadn't registered it. Sweet and rotten, like fruit that had gone bad weeks ago. But underneath that, something else, something chemical. I looked into the tree line and saw what I can only describe as a clearing that shouldn't have been there. The trees just stopped in a rough circle, maybe 20 feet across, and the ground inside was bare dirt. No leaves, no grass, nothing growing, just flat, dark soil. I didn't go into the clearing. I grabbed my detector and walked back across the field as fast as I could without running. When I got to my car, I sat there for 10 minutes with the doors locked before I could make myself drive. I reported it to the county sheriff's office the next day, gave them the coordinates, told them what I found. They thanked me and said they'd look into it. That was 3 months ago. I've called twice for updates. Both times, the dispatcher said there was no record of my report, no case number, no file, like the conversation never happened. I still have the rings. I keep them in a bag in my garage. I checked them again last week. They are still warm. They're all right. The next story takes place on private land in Georgia. A detectorist gets permission to search an old plantation property, with one condition. The owner tells him to stay away from the northeast corner. This one's called permission denied. The landowner told me I could detect anywhere on his property except the northeast corner. He said it 3 times during our conversation, which should have been my first warning. His name was Earl, and he owned about 60 acres outside of Macon, Georgia. I'd found the property on a detecting forum where someone said the land had been a plantation before the Civil War. Earl was in his 70s, lived alone in a farmhouse that looked like it hadn't been painted since the 80s. He was friendly enough when I knocked on his door, said I was welcome to search the fields, the old barn foundation, even the area around the house, but not the northeast corner, not past the stone wall. I spent the morning working the fields near the house and found some decent stuff. A few mini balls, some square nails, a button that might have been military, standard Civil War era finds. Around noon, I took a break, ate a sandwich in my truck, and studied the aerial view of the property on my phone. The northeast corner was mostly wooded, bordered by that low stone wall Earl had mentioned. Nothing unusual about it on the satellite image, just trees. I went back out in the afternoon and worked my way north. The signals were getting better, more consistent, older. I found a belt buckle, a coin that looked like it might be from the 1850s, and a spoon. The closer I got to the stone wall, the more hits I was getting. I didn't cross the wall. I want to be clear about that. I stayed on my side, but I could see past it, and what I saw made me uneasy. The trees on the other side were normal enough, but there were objects hanging from the lower branches. At first I thought they were wind chimes or bird feeders, but when I looked closer through my binoculars, they were small bundles wrapped in cloth, dozens of them, hanging from fishing line or wire at different heights, swaying slightly even though there was almost no wind. I also noticed the ground past the wall looked disturbed, not freshly dug, but not natural either. There were shallow depressions spaced evenly apart, maybe 30 or 40 of them, arranged in rough rows, like something had been buried and the soil had settled over time. My detector started picking up signals from across the wall, strong ones, consistent depth, the same signal over and over, spaced evenly, matching the depressions in the ground. Whatever was buried in those rows was metal, and there was a lot of it. I heard Earl's screen door slam. I looked back toward the house and he was standing on his porch, watching me. He was too far away for me to read his expression, but his posture was rigid. He wasn't waving me over or shouting. He was just standing there. I waved at him. He didn't wave back. I packed up my gear and walked back toward the house. When I got close enough to talk, Earl was sitting in a rocking chair on the porch with a glass of water. He asked if I'd found anything good. I showed him the belt buckle and the coin. He nodded, said that was nice. Then he asked if I'd stayed away from the northeast corner. I said yes. He looked at me for a long time without blinking. Then he said good, because the people who are resting over there don't like to be disturbed. I asked him what he meant. He just took a sip of his water and said I should probably head on home before dark. I drove back to my hotel and couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those depressions, the spacing, the uniformity, the signals my detector picked up, and those hanging bundles in the trees, like markers or offerings. I looked up the property records the next day. The land had been in Earl's family since 1831. The plantation had enslaved over 100 people. There was no cemetery on any official map, no death records, no names, but someone knew where they were, and someone was still tending to that ground. I never went back, but sometimes I think about those signals, all the same depth, all the same tone, perfectly spaced, and I think about what Earl said. The people who are resting over there, present tense, like they weren't gone, like they were just lying still. This next one is one of the more disturbing stories I've received in a while. A detectorist goes to a remote beach in Oregon at low tide and finds something buried in the sand that was never meant to be found. This is called low tide. The detector hit on something big about 20 feet from the waterline, and when I started digging, the sand was already red. Not rust red, dark red, the kind of red that made my hand stop moving before my brain caught up. I was on a beach in southern Oregon, a stretch that's technically public but so hard to access that you almost never see anyone else there. You have to hike down a cliff trail for about a mile, and the beach itself is narrow, hemmed in by rock formations on both sides. I liked it because the tides brought in all kinds of debris, and the sand was dense with iron signals. I'd found old fishing weights, a pocket knife, and a few coins on previous trips. This time I'd arrived at low tide around 6 in the morning. Fog so thick I couldn't see more than 40 feet in any direction. The ocean was just a sound, a constant low roar somewhere to my left. The red sand was about 6 inches down. I told myself it was mineral deposits, iron oxide, something natural. I kept digging. The signal was solid, large and deep. At about a foot down, I hit fabric. Thick fabric like canvas or denim. I pulled at it and uncovered what looked like a backpack strap. I stopped digging with my trowel and started using my hands. I uncovered more of the backpack. It was buried vertically, like someone had shoved it into a hole and pushed sand over it. The fabric was stiff and stained. I unzipped the main compartment. Inside was a set of clothes, jeans, a flannel shirt, socks, underwear, all neatly folded. Underneath the clothes was a wallet. I opened it. Driver's license, 2 credit cards, $40 in cash. The license showed a man named David Parr, age 34, from Medford, Oregon. The photo showed a normal-looking guy with a beard and glasses. At the bottom of the backpack, wrapped in a plastic bag, was a cell phone, dead battery, and a car key, a single Toyota key on a plain ring. I sat back on my heels and looked around. The fog was still thick. I couldn't see anything beyond the vague shapes of the rocks on either side of the beach. The tide was coming in. I could hear it getting closer. I almost called the police right then, but something made me keep searching the area. I swept my detector in a circle around the hole and got another hit about 5 feet away. I dug. This time I found a second backpack. Different brand, different color. Inside was another set of clothes, another wallet, another phone, another car key. This license belonged to a woman named Christine Oberg, age 28, from Grants Pass. I got a third hit, and a fourth. Over the next 20 minutes, I found 6 backpacks in total, all buried the same way, all containing the same things: clothes, wallet, phone, key. 6 different people. None of the backpacks contained shoes. I don't know why that detail is the one that stays with me. 6 people, stripped of their identities. Their belongings packed neatly into bags and buried in the sand on a beach that nobody visits. But the thing my mind keeps going back to is the shoes. Where were their shoes? I called the police from the trailhead because there was no signal on the beach. They sent a team down the next morning. I gave a statement and handed over everything I'd found. The detective told me they'd be in touch. They did call me back about 3 weeks later. The detective said they'd identified all 6 individuals. All had been reported missing over the past 4 years, all from different towns in southern Oregon. None of them knew each other. None of their cases had been connected before. I asked if they'd found anything else on the beach. The detective paused for a moment and then said they'd found additional burial sites further down the beach, closer to the rock formations. He wouldn't tell me how many. I asked if they'd made any arrests. He said the investigation was ongoing and that I should avoid that beach for the foreseeable future. I haven't been back, but I check the news every week and there's never been a story about it. No arrests, no press conference, no follow-up. 6 missing people, all found in the same place, and not a single word in the media. Sometimes I pull up the satellite view of that beach and just stare at it, that narrow strip of sand between the cliffs and the water. The tide comes in twice a day and covers every inch of it. Whatever else is buried there, the ocean has been keeping it hidden for years. And whoever put those backpacks there knew exactly how the tides worked. They knew no one would find them. I found them by accident, and I don't think I was supposed to. Okay, this next one genuinely unsettled me. A man goes detecting along a creek bed in Pennsylvania and encounters someone or something hiding in a drainage pipe. What happens next doesn't follow any logic I can explain. This one's called The Man in the Culvert. I heard the breathing before I saw him. Slow, wet, deliberate breathing coming from inside the drainage culvert about 15 feet to my right. And it stopped the moment I turned my head. I was detecting along a creek bed in rural Pennsylvania, about 2 miles from the nearest road. It was a spot I'd read about on a forum, an old colonial-era crossing where people had supposedly found King George coppers and silver sixpences. The creek was mostly dry, just a trickle of water running through a bed of smooth rocks and red clay. On one side, the bank rose steeply into thick forest. On the other, a flat stretch of farmland ran to the horizon. The culvert was a corrugated metal pipe, maybe 4 feet in diameter, set into the bank where a drainage ditch met the creek. Standard agricultural drainage. Nothing unusual, except someone was inside it. I stood perfectly still and listened. Nothing, just the trickle of the creek and a few birds. I told myself it was an animal. A raccoon, maybe. I went back to detecting. 5 minutes later, I heard it again. That breathing, slow and rhythmic, with a wet rasp on the exhale, like someone with fluid in their lungs. I looked at the culvert. The opening was dark. I couldn't see more than a foot inside. The breathing continued this time. It didn't stop when I looked. I called out, "Hello, is someone in there? Do you need help?" The breathing stopped. Then very quietly, a voice said, "Come here." It was a man's voice. Flat, no emotion, no urgency, just "come here," like he was reading the words off a card. I did not go there. I took a step back and said I was going to call for help. The voice didn't respond. The breathing didn't resume. The culvert was just a dark circle in the bank, silent. I turned around and started walking back the way I'd come, following the creek bed. I'd gone maybe 50 yards when I heard something behind me, not breathing this time. Footsteps, slow, crunching footsteps on the creek rocks. I looked back. A man was standing in the creek bed where I'd just been. He was about average height, wearing dark clothes. I couldn't make out his face at that distance, but I could see that he was standing completely still, facing me. His arms were at his sides. He wasn't holding anything that I could see. I picked up my pace. The footsteps resumed behind me. Same slow pace. Not hurrying, not falling behind, matching my distance. I walked faster. The footsteps matched. I slowed down. They matched. The distance between us stayed exactly the same no matter what speed I moved, like he was calibrated to me. I broke into a jog. The creek bed was uneven, and I nearly twisted my ankle twice. I didn't look back. I could hear him behind me, still at that same measured pace, but somehow keeping up despite moving slower than I was. The creek met the road at a small bridge. My truck was parked on the shoulder. I scrambled up the bank, threw my gear in the bed, and got in. I locked the doors and looked back at the creek. He was standing at the bottom of the bank, right where I'd climbed up, still facing me, still motionless. I could see him more clearly now. He was wearing a dark jacket and pants. His face was pale, almost gray. He had no expression. None. Not anger, not curiosity, not amusement. His face was completely blank. He didn't come up the bank. He just stood there looking at me, while I started the truck and pulled onto the road. I watched him in my rearview mirror until the bridge blocked my view. I drove straight home, which was about an hour away. I didn't stop. When I got home, I unloaded my gear from the truck bed, and that's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. My pinpointer was missing. It's a small handheld device I clipped to my belt. I'd had it the entire time I was detecting. I always clip it on the same spot. It was gone, which means at some point while I was walking away from that man, while he was following me at that impossible steady distance, something had come close enough to unclip it from my belt without me feeling it. I have not been able to explain that. The pinpointer clips on tight. You can't just brush against it and knock it loose. You have to squeeze the clip and pull. Someone would have had to be right next to me, right behind me, close enough to touch me, and I never felt a thing. I've never gone back to that creek. I've never posted about the location, but I still checked the forum where I found it. And about 2 months after my experience, someone posted asking if anyone had detected that site recently. A few people said yes. One of them mentioned hearing strange sounds near the culvert. Nobody replied to his comment. The thread was deleted a week later. This last story is the hardest one to talk about, not because it's supernatural, but because it's real. A detectorist is hired to survey a former children's home before construction, and what he finds in the ground changes everything. This is called Plot 16. The child's shoe was the first thing I pulled out of the ground, and it still had a foot in it. Small, skeletal, barely bigger than my hand. I need to go back to the beginning. I'd been hired by a property developer in upstate New York to survey a parcel of land before construction started. They wanted me to sweep the site for buried utilities, old septic tanks, anything metal that might cause problems during excavation. It was a legitimate job. I had a contract. The property was a former state-run children's home that had operated from the 1920s through the mid-1970s. The buildings had been demolished in the 90s. All that was left were concrete foundations, some crumbling walls, and about 12 acres of overgrown land that the developer wanted to turn into townhouses. I started at the north end of the property, near what had been the main building. The signals were what I expected: nails, pipes, rebar, the usual demolition debris. I worked south through the morning, mapping everything on a grid. Around midday, I reached an area in the southwest corner that was set apart from the rest of the property. There was a chain-link fence around it, mostly fallen down, and inside the fence were rows of small concrete markers, each one about the size of a brick, set flush with the ground. They didn't have names. They had numbers. I counted 43 of them. This was clearly a burial ground. Small markers, numbered not named, at a children's home. I knew what this was. I called the developer and told him. He said he was aware of the cemetery and that the county had already approved the construction plan. He said the graves had been relocated in 1994. The markers were just remnants that hadn't been removed. He told me to keep surveying. I swept the detector over the cemetery area, expecting nothing. I got signals immediately. Strong, shallow signals. Everywhere. Not one or two, dozens. The entire area was full of metal. I shouldn't have dug. I know that now, but at the time, I was thinking like a surveyor. If there was metal in the ground that the excavators were going to hit, I needed to document it. The first hole I dug was next to marker 16. 6 inches down, I found the shoe and the bones inside it. I stopped immediately. I put the shoe back in the hole as carefully as I could. I covered it with dirt, and I called the county coroner's office. While I waited, I walked the perimeter of the cemetery. I counted the markers again. 43. Then I looked at the numbers on the markers. They didn't go up to 43. They went up to 112. Most of the markers were missing, removed or destroyed, but the numbering told me there had been at least 112 burials in this small fenced area. The coroner arrived with a deputy. I showed them the shoe. They took photographs and made calls. Within 2 hours, the site was taped off and I was asked to leave. Before I left, I spoke with the coroner privately. I asked him about the 1994 relocation. He looked at me for a long moment and then said he had no record of any relocation from this site. The graves had never been moved. The developer had lied, or the county had lied, or someone in the chain of paperwork had signed off on a relocation that never happened, and no one had checked. I went home that night and started researching the children's home. What I found made it hard to sleep. The facility had been investigated twice, once in 1961 and once in 1973, both times for allegations of abuse and neglect. Both investigations were closed without action. The home shut down in 1976 after a fire destroyed the East Wing. 3 children died in the fire. Their names were in the newspaper, but the article also mentioned, almost as an aside, that the home's records had been largely destroyed and that the exact number of children who had lived and died there was unknown. Unknown. Over 50 years of operation, and nobody kept track of how many children passed through or how many didn't make it out. The developer's project was halted pending investigation. I followed the story for months. The county ordered a ground-penetrating radar survey of the entire property. They found anomalies consistent with human burials, not just in the fenced cemetery, but in 3 other locations on the property, under what had been the main building, behind the kitchen, and in a wooded area at the far south end that had never been part of any official site plan. The total number of potential burial sites was over 200. The last update I could find was a brief county meeting minutes entry from 8 months later. It said the investigation had been referred to the state. No further details, no names, no follow-up articles, no memorial. I still have the grid map I made that day. I look at it sometimes. All those signals packed tight, row after row, each one a child that someone put in the ground and marked with a number instead of a name. And then someone else signed a piece of paper saying they'd been moved, and everyone just accepted it. And a developer bought the land and planned to build townhouses on top of them. I think about marker 16. I think about how small that shoe was. And I think about the 112 markers that were supposed to be there. And the 100+ graves that weren't even in the cemetery. Children who weren't just forgotten, they were erased. And if I hadn't been hired to wave a metal detector over that ground, no one would have ever known they were still there.
And that's where tonight's file closes, but the archives are far from empty. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more horrors, mysteries, and true crimes hidden in the horror archives. Until next time, keep the lights low, keep listening, because you never know what story we'll uncover next.